Well, hello everyone. Welcome to Music is a Journey. I'm Peter. Today's video is for two people. The first is George at George G's Room of Rock. He gave us the February Forgotten Albums Challenge at the beginning of February. He asked us to take a listen to some albums that we have not listened to in at least 5 years, or even more, of course. And because February has exactly 4 weeks, he asked us to try to listen to at least 2 albums per week, or maybe 2 albums per week anyway, and at the end of the month to do a video about our impressions of the albums that we listened to. I got a little bit ambitious and I wanted to jump on it and do 3 albums a week because I actually have had a couple of playlists on my computer, one for prog albums I haven't listened to in a while and one for metal albums I haven't listened to for a while. And I thought this is a good chance to finally tackle those playlists, which I created probably over 2 years ago and haven't touched yet. As it was, in the end, I felt I should narrow it back down to maybe 10 albums. However, a second thread or request anyway came out, and this is from Pat over at Close to the Edge. Pat recently underwent some surgery, and I understand that he is at home recuperating over the next couple of weeks. I think he came home last week, so maybe one more week to go. But Pat said that while he's at home, he would like something to watch, so he would like us to talk about the last 15 albums that we listened to. So this was a good chance to kind of tie those two ideas together, because I did actually listen to about 12 albums for George G's Room of Rocks challenge. And as well, I recently did a video on metal bands from Montreal, and during that time I also listened to some albums I hadn't listened to for a while. And plus there were some extras I put in. In fact, I was so busy listening to these albums I haven't listened to in somewhere between 7 and maybe almost 18 years now, actually, some of them. I bought them about 18 years ago, the oldest ones, and I listened to them a lot at that time, but for a while I haven't really gone all the way through. So yeah, it was a good chance to just get into all that, and then I ended up not listening to any of the new stuff that I bought. So in March, I'm going to be concentrating on all the new stuff. However, I think this is a great idea. It's something I think I would like to do maybe every month. Say like the last week of every month, I will revisit 5 albums I haven't listened to in over 5 years and maybe do a video about that. So anyway, one more channel to mention before we get started here, that is Let's Talk Metal. The fella there, Alan, he did a video earlier in February as well about why we don't listen to our favorite albums as much as maybe we should or would be expected to. And I will put a link to his video in the description, because it was kind of interesting to think, like, based on if you listen to 4 albums a day for 5 days each week, so 20 albums a week, how much time would it take you to cycle through your collection if your collection is 20 albums, 100 albums, 500 albums, 2,000 albums, and so on? So when you start getting a pretty hefty collection, like a lot of us here in the VC have, it's easy to see that it can take you over 2 years or more to get through every album in your collection. So I'll put a link to George G's presentation, his video recently he put out where he talked about the 8 albums he listened to. I will put a link to Pat's latest video. If you haven't seen Pat's channel, then it's a good chance for you to go over and check it out. And then I will also put a link to that Let's Talk Metal video. So let's get started here. This is actually my second attempt at this video. I did it the other night and it turned out to be over 40 minutes long. I want to make it a bit shorter. So we're going to start here. This is the first one I listened to. This is a band called Syzygy. They are a progressive rock band who are from the US somewhere. Okay, I just quickly glanced at my notes. I didn't write where they're from. From the US somewhere. They formed in early 90s, and they were operating under the name Wits End. At first, they did 1 album in 1993 under that name, and then they changed their name to Syzygy later on. And in 2003, they released their second album. This is their third, called Realms of Eternity. It's from 2009, and it is also their last studio album. They released a live album after this. This is a band that has a lot of the classic progressive rock elements. You've got your distorted and clean guitar, you've got synthesizer and organ and piano, you've got acoustic guitars, a bit of flute as well in some places, some Tracks are about 5 minutes, 6 minutes long, but some are a little bit longer, some are a little bit shorter. Lots of complicated music and maybe a lot like early Spock's Beard and Flower Kings, but also some Yes or Genesis, that type of thing. A very enjoyable album. It actually got very high praise, apparently, from Patrick Moraz and Steve Hackett. Both said this is a very good album. So it is actually 77 minutes, 10 seconds long. And that is the one strike against it, I would say, is that it's too much of a good thing almost. We actually have 6 tracks at first, which would be enough to make a very excellent album. But then there is the second part is The Sea, which is over 23 minutes long and broken into 7 individual tracks, but they all flow into one another. So a little bit like a 2112 type of a thing here. Lots of excellent music, but maybe it might have been just a little bit more digestible if we had it as 2 discs, where one disc was the first 6 tracks and the second disc was The Sea. As it is, it's all on one disc. Lots of great music, just 77 minutes of basically the same band in the same era. You know, it's might be a little bit too long. Moving on, we're going to look at Orange Goblin. This is a stoner metal band from London, Britain, not Ontario. And they formed back in the early, what did I get here? Orange Goblin formed back in London in 1995, and they just decided to call it quits early in 2025. So yeah, they've been around for 20 years. They've released 10 albums. This is called The Big Black. It is their 3rd album. And this album, I know why I didn't listen to it so much. It's because the production is very dense. It's like if, you know, like if your big brother has a stereo in his room and he's sitting on his bed and the stereo speakers are facing him and he's blasting this album, but you are outside the bedroom with the backside of the wall to the speakers and you're trying to listen through the wall. It has that feeling like, you know, you're not getting the full effect. Something is dampening the sound. But other than that, I really enjoyed revisiting this. There are some great stoner metal riffs, that really loud fuzzy guitar that make your pant legs flap. Sometimes a little bit Sabbath-esque doomy type rips, but also a lot of groovy parts and a little bit more toned back parts just with some groove to them, some spacey parts to it. So really enjoyable. And because I liked this one so much, I found their 2nd album on an online flea market. So I got it for quite cheap. Actually, I think it was Yahoo Auction, but just, you know, what is it? Buy now option type of thing there. So I am looking forward to listening to this one. So that is Orange Goblin. Now, next one, and this is also the one that I featured just a little clip of music at the beginning of this video. This is a band called Astra from California, and this is their album, The Black Chord. Here is the full effect of the cover here, also some artwork on the back. So Astra have only released 2 studio albums, one in 2009 called The Weirding Way, and then this one from 2012. This was one of the first progressive rock albums I picked up probably around 2013 when I really began exploring modern day prog. And this is a really fabulous album musically. You have to imagine your early Pink Floyd, the more space rock or atmospheric type things or experimental type bits, but put together with some Hawkwind and some Eloy, maybe a bit of Nectar, a slight touch of Genesis or so, and then just take that whole concoction and infuse it Matrix style into the minds, into the brains of a bunch of Californian musicians, and then ask them to record an album. And this is likely what you're going to get. It's not too long. It's something like about 43 minutes or so, 6 tracks. The shortest track is just over 2 minutes. The longest track is over 14 minutes. But what an exciting album with loads of Mellotron and Moog synthesizer, some softer parts with the soft, almost Gilmour-esque style, soft vocals, a bit of flute and acoustic guitar, lots of spacey effects and reverb and crazy guitar sounds, very exciting music in parts. So this is really such a fantastic album. Again, though, I know the reason why I don't go back to it often is because, as with Orange Goblin, there is a density to the production that removes some of that free-flowing music feeling. It's like you're sitting in front of a wonderful high fidelity stereo system, putting on a wonderful album, but just before you start listening to it, you put cotton in your ears. So something is being taken away from the music by the production, but otherwise this one, The Black Chord by Astra, is really such a phenomenal album. I think Brian at Cosmic Vinyl would love this album. The next one I went to is a band called Suspire. This is their third of 4 albums. Checking my notes, they're all in a different order here. So they're from New Jersey, and they released 4 albums between 2005 and 2012. This is When Time Fades from 2008. This is a symphonic progressive metal band, so a bit like if early Symphony X and Dream Theater had a child. Lots of classically inspired lead guitar work and complicated riffs and so forth. Also some metal guitar sounds as well. The vocals are clean vocals, sometimes with a bit of a tough, gruff edge to them, but nothing in the extreme metal realm, so that makes them accessible in that way. We have some orchestration in some of the songs. I'm not sure if it is actual live orchestra or if it's just some very good sounding music creation software, but it does sound very nice. We've got some guest female vocals in a track. We've got some keyboard solos in some tracks. We have saxophone appearing in one track. It's almost like the band has their style of this progressive symphonic metal, but tracks will have these extra little things here and there. The only thing that, again, is that this album is something like 73 minutes long or 75 minutes long. So after a while, it feels like, okay, it's just getting to be too much of a good thing. And as I was listening to it the other day for the second time, I was listening, concentrating on the music, and then I had to get off the train and go through the station and get down and get over to the road that I normally walk on to where I was going. And all that time I was kind of distracted by things. And once I started focusing on the music, I felt like I hadn't missed anything. It was just, oh, they're still doing the same thing. So very good. There's a track on here I would recommend listening to called Lighted End Rhyme. And in fact, I think I should put links to the tracks of all of these albums, if I can, in the description. So take a look for that. Yeah, really good album, but probably once again a little bit too much of a good thing. Maybe under 50 minutes would have made it easier to appreciate this album more. Next, Thank You Scientist. Where are Thank You Scientist from here? Thank You Scientist are also from New Jersey. Started in 2009. This is their debut album in 2012 called Maps of Non-Existent Places. They are a 7-member band with vocals, excellent lead guitar player, could have been in a metal band. Also bass drums, and then we've got some violin and saxophone and trumpet. I don't remember hearing any keyboards on here. So there is a lot of like a funk and soul in that, herky-jerky progressive rock. A lot of really cool music on here. There's one track called Blood on the Radio where they actually give time in the music to have this almost like 70s funk band stuff coming in with the trumpets going and so on. It's really, really cool. I think the only reason why I didn't revisit this album for a long time is I had this memory that the vocalist sounds like Michael Jackson, but it's only in a couple of places his voice gets to that high range, and then what he sings has a kind of Michael Jackson sound to it. But otherwise, I wouldn't say he sounds like Michael Jackson. No, this was a very cool album. And in fact, all of these albums for George G's Room of Rocks Challenge, I listened to them all twice. And it was this album here that made me think, I want to listen to this one a second time. And then after that, I listened to the other ones a second time as well. So very good to revisit. Thank You Scientist, Maps of Non-Existent Places. This is a band called Heart of Cygnus. Guess who their favorite band is? Yes, and you can hear it in the music. There are a lot of Rushisms in here. In fact, some parts, it just sounds like they borrowed it straight from the Rush Hemispheres albums. The guitar sound, the music sound, even the keyboard sound, this kind of Rush style keyboard sound is in here. This is an album. It is called the Voyage of Jonas. It is done like a concept album, concept narrative. It sounds like they took like the Necromancer, Fountain of Lamneth, Hemispheres, and maybe a bit of 2112 and tried to make this grand concept album like this. It has some really cool tracks on it. Like listening to it the first time recently, a couple of tracks caught my attention. And listening to it the second time, I'd say there are 5 tracks, maybe 6, that are just really solid, excellent tracks. We are talking about a progressive metal band, but like Rush, they're not like really heavy. We don't get the gruff vocals. We don't get the real dense heaviness. Very much inspired by Rush, if I didn't say that already. The only thing is that this album is similar to The Wall in that there are some tracks, like The Wall has Another Brick in the Wall Part 2, Mother, Comfortably Numb, which are fully fleshed out tracks that you can listen to as you would normally hear a song. But The Wall also has these shorter tracks, which are very nice, but end soon. And that's, I noticed a lot on here. There'll be a track that starts with a very bold guitar sound and maybe a timpani and very exciting music, but in less than 2 minutes, maybe even a minute or so, it feels like that's it. It's wrapped up and we moved on to the next track. And it's like, oh, I was really looking forward to hearing where they were going to go with that. So Heart of Cygnus, The Voyage of Jonas, not an album I think I'll be pulling out too often, but certainly there are about 5 tracks on here that are worth putting together on an individual playlist just to enjoy those over and over again. Next, we're looking at the Tea Club. Where are the Tea Club from? They're also from New Jersey. How about that? We got a lot of New Jersey representation here. So this is their first album from 2000 and, sorry, no, their first album was released in 2008, and this is Grappling, their 4th album from 2015. There is a very strong Genesis feel to the music, like that must have been their biggest inspiration from the classic prog bands. Maybe also you could draw some comparisons to Big Big Train, who also have a Genesis feel sometimes. But this album here, by the way, has only 6 tracks. The drums and the bass are really powerful in the mix, and it almost feels like the subtleties in the music are almost overwhelmed by the rhythm section. When they do a track like Dr. Abraham, that is a really dark and menacing sounding tune. There, the heavy influence, heavy what vibe of the drums and the bass seem like, okay, it's really adding to the emphasis of the kind of darkness and menace of the music. But on other tracks where they go a little bit lighter, when that drummer starts going nuts, it's almost a bit overwhelming, but still, you know, a very talented band. And I really did enjoy a lot of the music on this album. Just wouldn't mind if the the drummer could have his drums toned down a little bit sometimes. Sorry, drummers out there. I love the album cover too, by the way. That says the album cover was the reason I decided to give this album a listen in the first place and pick it up eventually. So what is that? That is 7. So this is the 8th album here, which is for George G's Room of Rock, February Forgotten Albums. This is Loudness and Biosphere from, I think it was 2002. I bought this when it first came out. Loudness are well known as a Japanese heavy metal band. Probably most people know them for their 1980s English output. This album here is 2002. They have a much heavier sound. Still heavy metal. We're not talking about extreme metal, although there are some speedy songs and very heavy songs. But still, I would say heavy metal anyway. Once again, the production is a little bit dense, which is a shame because there are some really killer tracks on here. The opening track, Hell Rider, is phenomenal. Like, I can enjoy listening to that one 2 or 3 times consecutively. It's so good. The title track, Biosphere, also is really good. And there are a few other ones on here that I'd forgotten about, but listening to this album again, twice over, those tracks stood out for me more. One interesting one is The Night is Still Young. It's interesting because the chorus has that 12-bar blues riff, like da 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 da, but it still is like a heavy metal type song. And I think the one thing to point out is that the second to last track, So Beautiful, is a ballad, which I don't particularly like. And then the last track, For You, is exactly a blues song, which seems out of place when the rest of the album, with a lot of variety, mind you, but still the rest of the album was a heavy metal album. So I could kind of pass on those last 2 tracks. The rest of it, though, quite enjoyable. And I've decided now to seek out the album that came either just before or just after this. It's called Spiritual Canoe, and I can pick up a used copy for a reasonable price. So that's that for George. Now I'm going to talk about a few more of the albums that I listened to just to bring it up to 15 for Pat over at Close to the Edge. This is a German artist going by the name of T. That's not him. His name is Thomas, and he does all the instrumentation on the albums. This is a woman that is pictured. All of his album covers, and most of them have a young woman on the cover for whatever reason. Who knows why. This is an interesting album because it does have those lively, energetic, progressive rock parts to it, but there are also some theatrical, whimsical parts. Like there's one where he sings something like, "The look on her face when she came in my room and she saw Dr. Doom." Like, why is Dr. Doom in your room? Is there a poster? Do you have a figure? What's going on? But other parts are really dark and more ambient, or have this very melancholic, almost lonely or despondent atmosphere to it. So there's quite a bit of variety. A lot of it is not what I would normally listen to, but I just like the way it sounds on this album. Also, one thing to point out is that Thomas's voice does have some David Bowie tendencies to it, and one reviewer on Prog Archives called him a second-rate David Bowie. So there is that, if that worries you or makes you interested. So I actually enjoyed listening to this album enough the second time that I sought out a used copy of his second to most recent album, Solipsistemology from 2019. And I should have said that this one here, which is called Fragmentropy, is from where? From 2015, and it is his fifth album. He has something like 8 or 9 albums out now. So that is T. Jet Black Sea, a band from the Netherlands. This is somebody from a band called Nine Stones Close. So he's done a more dark, ambient type of album. Like if you can picture Pink Floyd's more spacey, laid-back tunes, but with a darker feel to them and almost a heaviness about them. But the music never gets up to really high speed. It's sometimes quite subtle, like a kind of distant darkness that could suddenly grow big. And then some of the percussion sounds like it could be electronic. There's some heavy guitar, some Pink Floyd type lead guitar work, but again, more of this darker, ominous atmosphere to it. I didn't really enjoy this so much listening to it again recently, and this is also an album I've only listened to once, so I might have to give it a second listen. The track I remember buying it for is track 3, called The Law of Diminishing Returns, and this, by the way, is called The Path of Least Resistance. It is the first of 3 albums that Jet Black Sea released. It's just a very thin gatefold CD envelope type thing here. So I'm going to have to listen to this one again to see if I don't change my mind about it. Then I listened to, what is it called? Hypothetical by Threshold, a British progressive metal band. This is one of their older albums from 2001. I love the guitar sound of Threshold, and a lot of their music should be exactly what I like to hear. In fact, that's why I ended up buying 3 of their albums. There's something that is missing about Threshold's albums, though. I'm not sure what it is. It might be the production is too clean, which is strange because I usually like clean production. It might be the vocal style is just not quite to my taste, even though both singers in the band, over the course of their time, they've had 2 singers, both of them sing very well. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but listening to it again, there were certainly tracks that stood out for me, and this is a reissue that has 3 bonus tracks as well. I think Narcissus, which is the final track on the original album, track 8, that one I really enjoyed. And there was probably one other one, Sheltering Sky, maybe. So definitely a really good album. It is called progressive metal, but it is not like the Dream Theater style of progressive metal. It's more like traditional, modern traditional heavy metal with some progressive tendencies, but not overly so. Anyway, a good album, but I might have to give it a second listen. One I did manage to visit twice. This is a band called Hanker and their album Web of Faith. I think Hanker, I don't know if they're still active or not now, but they only released about 4 or 5 albums, and I think this is their 4th one going back to 2004. This is like your 1980s American power metal style. It reminded me of 1984, 85, when my friend and I used to go to the store and just look for bands that we'd never heard of before and then buy their albums. And you know, sometimes we get something that was really good. But as was often the case, even if we thought the album was really good, we ended up not listening to it too much after the initial, you know, like the honeymoon was over quickly. It's like, wow, it's a great album. And 2 weeks later, it just sits in the cassette box. So this one here is similar to that. Like every track sounds really good. There's even almost kind of like sing-along power metal feel sometimes. And just basically like that American power metal style from, you know, like 83, 84, maybe 85, around there. Things like, I don't know, Riot, Thundersteel, or Manowar, that kind of thing. A couple of tracks that stood out for me was Do or Die, which is track 5, and The Search, which is track 7. But overall, I think Kim said this in his response to George G's Room of Rock about a different album. But he said, like, he enjoys listening to it, but there's nothing memorable about it afterwards to make him want to go back again. So aside from those 2 tracks, maybe, but I did not finish listening to this for a second time. So maybe a second listen will produce something a little bit more to my interest. Who knows? And the last 3 to go over, this is Joe Lynn Turner, Secondhand Life. I bought this back in the late 2000s when I was on this big Deep Purple family kick. This is a very good melodic hard rock album, exactly what you would expect from Joe Lynn Turner. Sometimes there's a feel like the classic Joe Lynn Turner Rainbow period, just with a more up-to-date production style and guitar sound. The opening track, Your Love is Life, is a very beautiful, catchy sing-along chorus. And there's some different moods, some of them a little bit heavier and serious, some of them a little more, pop-oriented. In a way, I feel this is an album of cliches. It's like a pastiche of melodic hard rock cliches, exactly, again, what you would expect from Joe Lynn Turner. But certainly there are 3, possibly 4 tracks on here that I would go back to revisit again if I'm in the mood. Then we've got Gillan, Ian Gillan, with the album Toolbox. This is after he was ejected from Deep Purple in the late 80s. He did a solo album called something Thunder. Forgot what it's called now. Anyway, and then after that, he put a band together and decided he was going to reboot the Gillan Band just with all new musicians. And they got this one album out featuring Leonard Hayes from Y&T on drums. It is a very good Gillan-style hard rockin' album. Lots of great vocal performances, as you would expect from Ian Gillan. Good guitar sound, lots of good rockin' tunes. Almost in some ways a cliche of Gillan himself at times, but still very enjoyable album. Unfortunately, or fortunately, during the time that the band was touring for this album, the rest of the Deep Purple members, Ritchie Blackmore aside, wanted Gillan to come back. And so Deep Purple's management started apparently sabotaging their tour in order to tell Ian Gillan, stop doing this and come back in the band. We need you. So this is a cool one to check out if you've never heard this Gillan album. And finally, this is a double album. It is, what is it called? Slipstreaming is one and Future Times is another. Yeah, and this is 2 albums on 1 disc by Nick Simper's Fandango. Nick Simper being the original bass player for Deep Purple. This is a late 70s, 2 albums from the late 70s. And this is, I think it's like 78 and 80 or something like that. So anyway, that late 70s, early 80s hard rock style, you get some hard rockin' tunes, you get some rock and roll tunes, you get some boogie tunes. One of the songs has that, boogie rock piano with, going down to Mississippi and meeting that Mississippi girl. The song you've heard hundreds of times already, not really all that interesting, but there are still some pretty decent tracks on here. Definitely an album worth keeping anyway, just to have my Deep Purple family collection, in my Deep Purple family collection, and a few tracks that would be worth putting on a mixed playlist, for example. So that's it for George G's Room of Rock, the first 8 albums, and the extra 15 to round it up to extra 7 to make a total of 15 for Pat. Once again, video links to George G's Room of Rock, Alan's Let's Talk Metal, and Pat's Close to the Edge channels as well. Once again, I will try to put links to most, if not all, of these albums, at least 1 track from these different albums. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. I hope this video is under 40 minutes, maybe even under 30, and we're done. See you in another video sometime. Thank you, and yeah, bye.